All right. So we talked about policies a little bit before. So we talked about things like in another video, known exploited vulnerabilities, checking for malware, checking for misconfigurations in a Docker file, checking for secrets that are getting leaked. A lot of best practices that we see as core requirements for a lot of organizations that are following software supply chain security. So we have a lot of different requirements that we see here looking for license abuse, license misuse, looking for malware, looking for known exploited vulns, looking for secrets, looking for misconfigurations, building from approved images, blocking those images if they violate those policies, and really taking that enforcement action. I think there's a lot of products out there that do a lot in terms of policy, but taking enforcement action is really the differentiator with Anchor, and we could do that at multiple stages of your SDLC. So some requirements we already talked about, right? Those are listed over there on the left. But these results from the policy can be used to determine whether an image should continue on in your pipeline or even be deployed in your Kubernetes cluster. And there's a lot of automated notifications that can be returned and generated with Anchor to help really streamline this process. So I think policy enforcement is great, but policy enforcement is really a force multiplier once you start tying it in with notifications. So, for example, if you generate a policy rule that says, yes, we want to alert on malware, well, you want that to alert on malware, but you also want it to notify the security teams, right? Because malware in your software supply chain shouldn't exist in a vacuum. It should be a notification that's sent to multiple teams so you guys can go out and triage the appropriate uh, issue and work with the appropriate stakeholders, right? So there's a whole nother video we could talk about configuring notifications so that way when there is a policy enforcement action, appropriate teams are notified of that, right? So that's a topic for another time, but for today we're just going to talk about the concept of mapping. So we have policy rules here, and a big question we get is, well, there's multiple rules, but I may want a certain rule or a certain group of policies to apply to a certain application, but not to another application. So, for example, when I'm looking at, let's say, Anchor Enterprise and Istio, this is a great example here. You'll see in the middle of the screen, I have policies listed, and I have specific checks meant for Anchor Enterprise, and I have another set of specific checks meant for Istio. But around those, I have like best practice checks. So I have things meant for like crypto mining. I have things meant for checking to make sure that the Docker file is configured correctly and that it's built appropriately, right? And those apply to both, but each will have application specific checks. So think about these as a great way to think about them is if you have a image that's built, that image should only have the appropriate users or appropriate ports being listed as exposed in their Docker file that's mapped to the specific application, right? So those are just two quick and easy examples, but you can quickly build out a list of allowed entries for each specific application. And the way you kind of allow those to be mapped appropriately is by using mappings. So you're able to go into the policy section and apply a certain set of policies to one application, which we specify here in this registry and repo tag. And that's it, right? So once you select that from the drop down, those mappings are applied appropriately, right? So we can actually take a look at what that looks like in our enterprise